Thank you for joining us on the Look Up Mindset podcast, where real stories of resilience, transformation, and adventure come to life. I'm your host, author, and storyteller, Heidi Siefkas. Each episode, we dive into the journeys of sheroes, heroes, and badasses who faced life's toughest moments and chose to rise. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's be inspired together. Welcome to the Look Up Mindset. I'm your host, author Heidi Siefkas. On this podcast, we're going to share real stories of resilience. Those moments that take your breath away and you try to find meaning. Stories of life transformation as well as adventure. But before I share your stories and invite guests from around the world, I must share my story and the spark for this podcast. It didn't start out as a book. Look Up did not start as a keynote or a TEDx talk. And it certainly didn't start out as a podcast. It started on a normal fall day that my entire life crumbled for the first time. So let me take you back to baseline. I was in my early 30s and I seemingly had it all. A high-power career in the travel industry that I worked very hard to get to as well as maintain. It was a part of my identity. I was happily married to a Brazilian chef, a lovely South Florida home. I was healthy and a very supportive community of friends, family, and neighbors. My life checked a lot of boxes, and I knew hard times would come, but I had no idea how fragile that life was. On a fall day in Poughkeepsie, New York, I took out the last night's pizza box to the dumpster, and my life changed. Unbeknownst to me, a tree limb weighing approximately 1,000 pounds from about 30 feet in the air clobbered me, struck me, leaving me unconscious in the driveway. As you can see, I'm very fortunate to be here. A good Samaritan called the paramedics and got me to the trauma hospital. I awoke in that trauma hospital's ICU 5 days later, not knowing what had happened to me. The doctors put the pieces of the puzzle together for me about the tree limb and told me that I had broken my C7 vertebra and that I would be undergoing neurosurgery as soon as the brain swelling stabilized, and that my recovery was uncertain, but it would be lengthy. I would not be returning to work. I would not be returning to Florida anytime soon. If that's not shocking enough to wake up in a ICU with a broken neck, this forced pause on my busy life gave me the opportunity to look at every aspect of my life underneath a microscope. There's not a part of my life that tree limb did not affect. So I underwent neurosurgery, and then I was limited to immobilization brace for the next 6 months. The entire recovery took about 1 year. But during that painful and lengthy recovery, I discovered so many things that by having a very busy life, I swept under the rug. I uncovered a trail of lies of a double life of my husband. He had been unfaithful for a very long time. Also, that high-power career that I identified with, they forced me to resign during this period. Everything that I held dear, my health, my marriage, and my career, in one fell swoop, on a normal fall day, a completely healthy tree. This story has many twists, turns, and I documented in my first book, When All Balls Drop. But when I found myself at ground zero, if you will, I had an opportunity to either rebuild the former life that wasn't serving me or to architect a new one. And I decided on the latter. but I wanted to make sure that the lesson that I learned from the tree would walk beside me in this new life. I couldn't control the tree. I couldn't control my husband's actions. I couldn't control the actions of my employer. But at every stage along that recovery, with the plot twists, whether it was from healthcare, insurance, long-term disability, or wondering what to do about my marriage, the only thing I could control was putting myself in the moment so that I would stop spiraling and then try to find the upside in the situation. And so I decided that in architecting a new life, I would embrace this lesson, which I distilled into a 2-word phrase, look up, which reminds us to be in the moment and find the upside. So what did I do? I was able to return to South Florida, and I prioritized my health as the first and foremost thing that I needed to do before I dealt with the other major tenets of my life. After nearly a year, I was deemed healthy, successfully fused C7 vertebra, surgery, months in a brace, as well as PT and really the guidance of mental health professionals, a neurologist, a chiropractor, you name it. I had a team of professionals that got me to that point. Then I made the painful decision to divorce my husband. And I don't care what anybody says, even if they cheated on you, if they were your business partner, if it just lost all the love. No one gets married to get divorced. And I decided that that was something I could not forgive and forget. And for my next career, I decided that I was going to go more independent. And I leaned in to my way with words, and I started formulating the idea to write When All Balls Drop, the upside of losing everything. I didn't write the book right away because I still had some processing to do. But along that year-long journey, I was writing in a journal. And it wasn't until about 1.5 years after that accident that I was on a solo walkabout to Patagonia, Chile, that I tested my entire being, my physical health, mental health, and emotional health by going on this walkabout to almost the farthest place on the planet from South Florida to prove to myself that what my doctors and my friends and family said, that I'm healthy, go and embark on a new life. I needed a full test. And on that walkabout, I met a couple from California. And during a couple-day-long hike in Torres de Paine National Park, I shared with them what I overcame over the past 1+ years. And they said, your story is so inspirational. You should write a book. And quite honestly, they coupled that with, it would be a really good movie as well. So on that walkabout, I proved to myself that I could travel internationally, that I could physically carry a pack over varied terrain and various weather challenges, that I could deal with currency exchanges, different languages, plan Bs, plan Cs, plan Ds. So fast forward a few years, and I published my first book, When All Balls Drop, The Upside of Losing Everything. And by sharing my very vulnerable story with others, whether it was feedback from readers or presentations to book clubs or being interviewed on news channels, podcasts, other people shared with me their stories of overcoming tremendous odds and coming out the other side with meaning, being a better version of themselves. And that is where I knew that Look Up had legs. And I got the idea over years to not only continue to write my stories, but I knew that many people don't share their stories they're more guarded, or maybe they don't have talents to write or the time to. So that's when I came up with the idea of creating an anthology of look-up stories from people from across the world of all different demographics, age, gender, religion, ethnicity, language, you name it. And in 2022, I started that project. And in 2025, I published that book. And it took nearly 30 interviews of over 24 individuals to craft these powerful chapters and a book that is my best work. And in sharing those stories of others, more stories came. And that is why this podcast exists. Because I would like to not only share the stories that I penned in that book to give those individuals and those nuggets of wisdom to you, to inspire hope, but also to invite new stories to be shared on this platform to inspire. I mentioned to you that this was a story of a tree and a normal fall day that changed my life completely for the first time. Well, in a few episodes, I will share the second time that life forced me to restart. I hope that this gives you a little bit more background as to who I am and the reason why I share my stories and why I wrote the Look Up Global Stories of Resilience, as well as this podcast. I thank you for listening and invite you to our next episode. Here's to looking up. Ciao. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Look Up Mindset podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If the story inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a boost. And remember, look up is always at your fingertips, whenever and wherever you need it. Until next time, here's to looking up.